and welcome to today's meeting of the Regeneration, Vibrancy, Climate Change Scrutiny Review Board. Moving straight to the agenda, do we have any apologies?
Yes, Chair. Councillor Bond, sir.
Councillor Bond, okay. Late items to be introduced by the Chair, there are none. Declarations of interest, has anybody got any declaration of interest? No? Okay. Minutes of the meeting held on the 24th of June 2025. Turn to those. Okay. We all looked at them and do we all agree with them? Yes? Okay. That one. No true and correct record. So item 5 is the Climate Change Action Plan. So turning now to the main items of the agenda. Our first item is the Climate Change Action Plan, which was adopted by the City Council and Cabinet earlier this year. In the lead up to this meeting, the Vice Chair and I have met to discuss this item and I decided to ask for officers to focus their presentation on the Council's energy usage and generation and the way the Council is financing climate change action. What I propose to do is consider the item in 3 parts. Let's start with the presentation and discussion about the Council's energy usage and generation. And let's then speak about street lighting separately, as I know it's a particularly significant topic. Finally, let's talk about climate, finance, and how the Council is allocating resources to meet this climate aims. To start with, can I ask us to provide an introduction and to present the information on the Council's energy consumption and generation opportunities?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jen Silver. I'm the Climate Change and Energy Manager for the Council. The Climate Change Action Plan was presented in detail to this scrutiny in January this year. So just for a very brief recap, this is our second iteration of the Climate Change Action Plan. So it builds on the progress and the lessons that we learned from our first plan, which covered the period 2022 to 2024. And this newer action plan, it comprises 35 high-level strategic actions that help the Council to move towards its 2035 net zero target. It includes actions across all scopes, so that's scopes 1, 2, 3, carbon emissions, and across all of our services. And that means that colleagues across all departments of the Council have responsibility for contributing to the progress of the action plan. So moving forward, next slide, please, Jack. The Council's overall energy consumption, so the last full year, which is 2023-24, was 34 million kilowatt hours. Breakdown there between gas and electricity. This is actually 21% less than the previous year, and that is largely due to the action that we've been taking as a council to improve our energy efficiency. Richard, I'm not sure if you wanted to give any examples of the energy efficiency projects.
Yeah, we've done 1 or 2 bits. We've done LED installations, PV installations that are going in, and not just that. Every project that we undertake from a construction point of view, it's all low energy measures are included in the construction project. So the recent community centre that's been done up, that's been gone through. It's had all LED lighting controls put in it, so it's put in as a standard measure. You know, all the fabrics, the installations improved, the window installations are improved. You know, so we're doing this as course. You know, that the improvements are showing through. Oh, yeah.
So as Richard was saying, this isn't just about carbon savings, it's about reducing our energy consumption and realising cost savings on energy bills alongside rationalisation of our estates. Moving on to energy generation, we had previous year, 2023-24, we generated 614,000 1,000 kilowatt hours of electricity, and that's from our hydroelectric power station on the river and from a number of solar arrays. The data on those is given in the appendix to the report. And this made up about 2% of the council's energy consumption from that year. Next slide. I'm going to hand over to Mike to say a little bit about our hydro plant.
Yes, thanks. Good evening, everybody. I'm Mike Kay. I'm the head of facilities management. It's the facilities management team that deals with the day-to-day operation of the hydro plant. Hopefully everybody understands where the hydro plant is, not on the river gardens. So yes, when that was constructed, it was delivering quite significantly on power to us. Over the years, the power generation has dipped a little bit, and there is a slide, I think, later on in the slide deck that talks about the amount of generation that we've had over the years. That's due to a number of things. It is quite fickle sometimes, our ability to be able to generate power. It's a bit like wind turbines. Sometimes you have to turn wind turbines off if it's too windy. Sometimes when the river is too high, especially during the times of the floods we've been having, or whether there's a lot of debris, you have to shut down the power generation down on there. But largely it has been doing well, even though it has been dipping off. So we have got some plans in place. We've started the process of undertaking some modifications to the hydro plant to increase its efficiency. So that's something that we are working on at the moment. We've received approval from the Environment Agency to undertake that work. A licence has been granted from them at the back end of May, the beginning of June. We have engaged a company called Derwent Hydro, which was the company that helped us to develop and build the plant originally, to do some design work. It all revolves around the intake screen underneath the surface of the river. So that work is currently in its design stage. We are hoping that will be taking place sometime over the spring and summer of next year. Now, what we're hoping is that will significantly increase, as it says in Gemma's first bulleted slide there, first bullet point on that slide. We are hoping that will significantly increase the power generation that we're able to utilise in the future.
Now moving on to the potential for further solar photovoltaic systems to generate energy. I'll hand back over to you.
Thank you. So the most recent PV installation we've done is at the Pride Park water treatment plant. That's a 22 kilowatt peak installation. Almost, well, all of the energy is being used on site, so we're getting maximum benefits out of that. So because the pump's running all the time, there's a significant load demand on that site, and it's already produced for us this summer nearly 11,000 kilowatt hours of electricity. So it really paying benefits, that is, and the payback for that is circa 4 years. 44,000 investment, and then we expect, according to the paperwork, 280,000 savings during the next 25 years in total. Now, and we're looking for opportunities all over the city. It's not as straightforward as what it never is. There's a big with installing solar PV on roofs. The structural demands from the wind flight is key, and we have to get that right. It's not just a matter of putting them everywhere what we think we can do. So there's a lot of work goes into behind in order to make sure the site is suitable for us to move forward with. But we are reviewing many sites across the city.
We are encountering a barrier to greater self-sufficiency, which is largely in terms of revenue funding. So I think my colleagues are going to outline the key issues there as well.
Essentially, if we use capital funding to undertake design work and it doesn't become fruition, then that has to be paid for out of revenue. And we don't have the spare revenue to soak that cost up. So that's a challenge for us. And we have to, more or less guarantee that the job is going to happen before we dare enter into it, because it simply comes out of our base budget. No.
So that's the end of the first section. So, any questions?
Well, I've got a question, if I may. So clearly, to me, the hydroelectric power plant is the river's there. It isn't going anywhere. Are we thinking about having another power plant put on the river somewhere? Could we, I suppose, is the question.
Well, I think there has been talk, hasn't there, locations over the years. Certainly, there are no current plans to put any more hydro power plant generation on the river that I'm aware of. No.
Do you think there should be, though, looking at those? I mean, what was the payback time on that?
On the
power plant?
I think it was probably significant. I think.
Sure,
Yeah, it was probably about 20 odd years, I think.
But it's been in there coming up to 15, is it? 10, 15 years?
I don't think it superseded me, Chair. Sorry, I don't know the exact date that it was.
Well, I was chair of the Climate Change Commission,
Was it?
which then said, yes, we will have that. So that would be 2008.
Yeah.
And it was probably a few years after that by the time it actually got built.
Okay.
I mean, it's got
14.
it sounds, so that's still 11 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, clearly there obviously are implications for placing, these kinds of facilities. And obviously, I suppose we benefited from the hydro plant that we've got now, because that was probably our land, public land that we could use. I'm not aware of any other discussions about any more.
No, quite a few years ago, before my time, some surveys were carried out in other parts of the river, and it wasn't found to be viable at that point in time.
Okay.
Other than that, there's a community group looking to potentially hydro Darley Abbey Mills area. That's the only other one.
Councillor Panley?
Thank you, Chair. So are there ongoing costs to maintain such a project, and are you aware of the costs? And you said 20 years is a payback time, and what about how long can it last for hydro plant?
Well, as long as we maintain it, it will last as long as we want it to be.
Do we have any idea how much of the annual maintenance cost?
I don't have that information. As Councillor England said, it isn't significant. And again, once we have these improvement works to it, we are looking at the possibility of doing other things whilst we can, because we've got to. You can envisage where it is. It's obviously on the weir, so the part of the weir at the hydro plant end is that little channel where it sucks water in and through there. So one of the things that we're going to need to do when we carry out the modifications to the screen is to stop the water flowing in that area. So we will do some maintenance work on the river bed at that point as well to clear that out and put the new screens in. And then hopefully, if we can identify some work that we can do that will help keep that silt and grit down as we then open it back up and start operating it, we'll look at to do some of those. So it's about doing the modifications, but it's also about taking the opportunity to do some preventative maintenance work on it that will help reactively down the line.
Councillor Rawson?
Yeah, good questions if I can. Looking at the slide about overall energy consumption and generation, we still use gas when we do electricity. So if a plan in place to try and switch as much away from gas as much as we can towards electricity. Secondly, do we, if you can, as a sort of a business customer, choose to just buy a plan that's just renewable energy? In reality, I think whatever's fed in, but it does message that we want to buy renewables with electricity. And then in terms of the solar panels, we're working with Derby Homes for any more capacity, more solar panels on Derby Homes to help tenants with their energy bills. Also increase the energy for using the system.
I can answer the middle question, which was about the tariff. So our main utility tariff, our electricity tariff, we did move on to a renewable tariff from April this year. So we've moved all of those onto to green renewable tariffs.
Switch over from gas.
Yeah, well, that's the next. Yeah. Okay. Well, it's a challenge. There's no two ways about it. If we move from gas boilers to air source heat pumps, in general, your energy costs will rise. We've no more money to pay for these rising energy costs. So it's getting that balance. We're not denying that that's where we need to move to, but the government to challenge with it as well. That if they want to get people to move over to air source heat pumps for generating heat and decarbonise heating, then somehow we've got to get the balance of finance right. And that is the underlying challenge from it all. So we are introducing a lot of hybrid systems where we've got 50-50 heat pumps and gas. We've done that on a number of schools over the last couple of years. That seems to be quite well received. Like I said, it's very difficult if you could easily end up increasing the energy costs by at least 40-50%. Not many people, it's not well received, shall we say. So
it's mainly schools, is it worth it figure for gas usage?
No, it's corporate buildings as well. And we're aware in corporate buildings we are looking at decarbonising the heating in corporate buildings. Again, that presents a challenge. The Kedleston Road is a neck running out across there where we've got an intention to either move to this heat network or move to air source heat pumps to heat Kedleston Road. But that will bring along the increased energy costs.
A friend of mine bought an e-boiler to replace his gas boiler to say how eco-friendly it was until he got his first electricity bill, and it was absolutely ridiculous. It was something like, let's say his electricity bill was 110 quid a month or whatever, and it went up to nearly £300 a month. Because of having this boiler in there. And I've got to be honest, it wasn't very good either.
I was being quite modest when I said 50% increase.
Yeah, because it went to
a lot more than that.
300 and something. Yeah. It was absolutely ridiculous. Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Chair. On this slide where it says opportunities for generating, it mentions the biggest barrier to greater self-sufficiency. It talks about the need for revenue funding, which we don't have, to produce feasibility studies. They're required to get or to apply for external funding. So, two questions. The first one, is this to commission studies and bring in like external help to create those feasibility studies, or is it be in-house in terms of forgetting who's the money to pay for it? Would it be office studies, or would you be reaching out to
Yeah, do you want me to go again? That's a mixed approach at this. So there's
fortunately, they've just withdrawn the main funding stream, what we was aiming for. But we understand that this, what's it called, Warm Homes, isn't it? What's the funding stream called? Warm Homes funding stream. We understand that is going to be the new pathway towards getting government money. But when we need to get a project to Reba stage 4 in order to have a sensible approach to, making a funding approach, a grant application. Otherwise, we either end up with not enough money to complete the work, and then we need to look internally for it, or too much. It's not very often you get too much, but nonetheless, it needs to be as accurate as possible. Now, if we go forward if we use capital funding to start with that, to get to Reba stage 4, and then we don't get the grant, and that has to be covered. It has to be converted to revenue, which we don't have the money to do. We really need a revenue funding stream to drive these projects through to Reba 4. That money's never going to be wasted, because even if it doesn't happen this year, we'd have to look internally at his own capital funding projects and such like, because we can't leave these buildings forever. They need dealing with, in order to get anywhere near net zero. So, it's not wasted money, but it does need, it needs a funding stream like that now.
Yeah, follow on to that then. Obviously, there's going to be a cost, regardless of whether the work's done in-house or with consultants or whatever, to do with the feasibility studies, speculate to accumulate. But I do get the fact that it needs paying for. Have officers considered the use of AI to help with the creation of the feasibility studies? Because that could bring the cost down significantly. Obviously it needs oversight, but that might be a way forward to actually drastically reduce the amount of resources required to get to the point of submitting the bids, requests for funding.
No, at this moment in time, I haven't.
I'd like to officers to look into that, because AI's, I'm not totally sure, but I would imagine that there's significant opportunities there to provide a lot of resources that may, I don't know what kind of percentage reduction it might be in terms of how much capital you'd have to allocate, but I think we definitely the officers should look at.
I agree. So I think AI is absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
That underground to agreements.
Yeah, so just a point.
Just drawing a parallel, still needs to not British, but we're finding that AI is really useful for producing the real cost that we see still there is a little bit from AI. It can generate tipping situations, but I'm assuming that you've got to get types of the real cost is that. But there is probably a percentage of production in kind.
Just going back to Councillor Rawson, he asked a question about more solar panels on Derby Homes roofs. Did we actually get an answer to that? I know I was cabinet member, we put hundreds on.
I'm aware that Derby Homes are working hard to cover as much PV, roofs with PV. I don't have the exact facts and figures, but Derby Homes, I know that there's a drive on to install PV, and there's also a drive to move from boilers to air source heat pumps. As I've said, that comes with baggage up.
Yeah.
Even for smaller properties, because I don't know how true it is that heat source pumps can only be, they're like quantity driven, isn't it? They're not very efficient if used in smaller homes.
I think it's the amount of power that they use to heat or cool.
I think they can be sized pretty much to accommodate smaller dwellings. They're only really tiny units. I've seen them on flats and such like, where they just sat out outside the balconies. So I'm pretty sure that they can be used in smaller. But you're right, the sizing of them is key, because they really need to run at a high percentage of their output in order to get their maximum efficiency. And if they're not, then their efficiency drops off terrible.
It's a bit of not the be all and end all that people think they are, because they're very expensive to run. Anyway, there's no further questions on that. We'll move on. Let's move on to the street lighting and the work that's taking place to reduce emissions in this area. Officer, if you could run through the slides, please.
Certainly. Good evening, Chair.
Good evening.
A couple of familiar faces in the room. For those who don't know me, I'm Michaela McCarthy. I'm street lighting. So, first slide basically sets out the scene as to where we are today in street lighting. Now, street lighting does account higher source of scope 2 emissions, and for those who are unfamiliar with scope 2 emissions, that is the indirect greenhouse gases from generation of energy that we consume for our business. Approximately half of that goes on street lighting, and as you can see, from 2022 to 2023, a 15% decrease in carbon. However, when we look at the overall picture for street lights, based on figures, verified figures from 2024-2025 financial year, we have reduced our energy by just over 50%. And that was from a peak in 2012, where those that were around the council in those days, when we had the PFI contract delivering the biggest investment phase, so where we were replacing 20,000 cars, that did significantly increase our energy. But through a number of energy efficient schemes that we've delivered through street lighting, we've been able to reduce our carbon from a database of 2017 to we've reduced it by 71.47%. And then since 2021, we've removed just over 116 tonnes of carbon from operations. And we've been able to do that by introducing energy efficient technology, LEDs. By introducing LEDs, we haven't got the operational demand of changing lamps. So those vehicles that are going out periodically, going out changing lamps, we've removed that. That is a saving, that is a climate saving. And then we've reduced the average electrical load by 43%. So that's every street light that's out there on the street. The big stuff and the little stuff is down from 96 watts to 54 watts. Next slide, please, Jack. So the reason why we've seen such significant changes and reductions is through the introduction of LEDs. As we've mentioned, the market was ready for LEDs circa around 2018 because the EU had legislation that came in that removed and banned the domestic general purpose sodium. So in September 2018, that was it. No more was being produced. And then Philips Lighting, who produce street lamps, finished their production lines. So what you had then from local authorities, you had a lot more demand for that kind of technology, not a great deal of supply. So the traditional lamp sources now on the market cost more than an LED lamp. We were early adopters in LED, so we started that journey as a trial back in 2014 with our major programme rolling out in 2018. And the benefits we've reaped from that is reduced carbon, reduced energy consumption, reduced maintenance costs because we're not having the frequency of those visits, and that has a byproduct of reduced operational costs, which we share with our PFI providers. So that's a financial saving as well. Most residential lights have already been converted, so we've got over 29,000 street lights in the city, and we've got a remainder of around that 7,000. 75% is already done. 25% that hasn't been done are the ceramic metal halide high intensity lamps that we need to remove from the stock because there's time limitations on that and also costs. We've also got traffic routes, so that's the big energy demanding lighting columns that we have on all the major traffic routes you see around the city. And then heritage lighting, there is now a retrofit LED solution which is sympathetic to heritage lighting now. Next slide, please, Jack. So how can we make this happen? So I think we all appreciate street lighting. It's a fundamental need for a city, and for a city that promotes security, and a city that extends operational life beyond the dark. So that adds to visitors' experience and vibrancy of the city. So we can make these savings by adopting the approach of the right light in the right place at the right time with the right control. Because actually, during the hours of darkness, there's only 25% of all travel done between 8 p.m. at night and 7 a.m. in the morning. So actually, we can reduce energy by converting to LED, and then by adopting dynamic control, so dimming those lights when there's not much movement on the network, make further savings. So that technology is here today, and we are using it in Derby. We use that on our traffic routes, and we're quite proud of the achievements that we've done, because where other cities have had to react to changes in the market, reacted to the volatility of energy prices, we were already one step. So we were early adopters. So we've already started that LED journey, and we have got the ability to dim as well. For solar power and solar power technology in a street lighting context, it's not really there for us. The Northern Hemisphere doesn't allow enough hours of daylight for a consistent lighting standard, street lighting across the area. So we'd get some token lighting, but from a resident's experience, it would not be enough. And I don't feel we'll ever get there. For adoptable highway, it's just not the solution for us. But we're always looking at changes in the market, and we're always looking at innovation. And then really the biggest barrier to greater efficiency would be the cost of borrowing. Those three projects have remaining. Based on the 7,000 assets that need to be converted to LED, we would save a third of energy and a third of carbon of our standing position as we are today. So that 71% energy saving would then go to 71% carbon saving would go to 80, but the actual energy savings would go to 75%, and then the watts per column would drop dramatically. So we're close, we're 75% of the way where we need to be. We just need to wrap up these further three projects with the funding, which is just over £5 million. That's it from me. If you have any questions.
Any questions? Councillor Rawson.
Just in terms of the new technology, I don't know if there's anything coming along the track in terms of motion sensors.
There is. There are. The trouble with motion sensors are they rely on gateways. So if I demonstrate, you've got a motion sensor here, but it relies on the person passing through that motion sensor. So say for instance, Nigel passes through an access point there, you won't pick Nigel up. So for parking, it should be perfect sort of setting. You're relying on people entering a designated point to react to that motion sensor. So does that make sense? So it's there, so just not practical.
As technology improves.
It might do, but I think what we're doing now with what's called dynamic lighting, so we're reducing to basically LEDs. So you go from 200 watt, let's call it a lamp, to something that uses 50 watts, it's a 75% saving. Then you add dimming, so actually the circuit watts you're using on that lamp becomes a fraction of the cost of what it was when it was operation on conventional lighting.
So,
Really, sometimes you can put a lot of cost and capital in technology. It just isn't the payback. It just isn't there.
Can you just go back to the slide that said £5 million? What's that? Just one question.
£5 million for the replacement of lights
Seven
that are not at the moment LEDs. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's it.
And that's just replacing the bulb.
No, I think whole thing.
Not replacing columns, so we're not replacing the structures. It's removing the lanterns and putting on LED lanterns.
So, which one was it? The one that says £5 million to finish the last 3 projects.
Yeah.
So yeah, cost of borrowing. The 3 areas of LED replacement would cost in excess of £5 million. Did you say that was 7,000 columns?
So in total, it's 7,189.
7,000. So just do some quick math. That's about
It's
700 quid.
It's expensive. And the reason why that looks expensive is because there's 6,000 of those assets are on traffic routes. And with traffic routes, you need traffic management. And that actually cost. The actual 2 other projects are really low. So one's £380,000 and the other one's £180,000. Traffic route project is £4.8 million on its own.
That's because you've mainly got to have traffic management in place.
Yeah, it's just all the most horrible, awkward places that you can think of in Derby. We'd have to get in there.
So I believe Mickleover like temporary traffic lights, don't you?
Don't start, Chair.
Would you like some?
Not more temporary traffic lights then.
Sure. You're on offer this week.
Yeah, so that's why.
So that's the cost. It's not actually. That's interesting, isn't it?
The reality is you'd be ironic. Some features by again spaces. Particularly where you put central reservation, very difficult to access.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not exactly just sticking the ladder, is it? It's going to be a bit more to it than that.
You'd be pleased to know that the payback is around, considering the longevity of the lanterns, the LED technology will last approximately 100,000 hours, which equates to 25 years of operational life.
Saying that, then the cost of electricity, anything to go by, mine's just gone up by 25% at home. So, I mean, you know, you said it to however many year payback, said, well, it could only be 6 months if we carried on the way it's going.
And that's it for street lighting. The payback kind of expedient. So when energy price goes up, the payback gets quicker.
Councillor Sander, have you got a question?
Chair, I was asked the same question. How did you read my mind? I was
Really impressed with the quick math. No, I used a calculator. I think you asked that. Okay, Councillor Holmes is next.
Yeah, on that, Chair, you know, the calculation per item, and I get the fact that it's in difficult places, traffic management, all the rest of it, which drives the price up. But is this via Balfour Beatty? So they would have almost like the contractual price to do this.
That's right.
Is that driven it up to 7 quid or whatever the figure is? Or, you know, or is that a result of the PFI?
It's a result of the PFI.
Yeah. So if it runs out in 2032, which is quite a way off.
It is.
But if we didn't have the PFI contract, I mean, what would we expect the cost to go down to? Do you think? I mean, I'm assuming it would drop. Would
What,
it?
the actual
For
civils
this,
work,
yeah, the 5 million we're talking about.
that's the market rate.
It's the market rate.
Yeah.
So if it was without the PFI contract, we'd expect
We'd
to pay
expect
that
similar,
anyway.
yeah, probably more, because we've got them on site, so they're our partner.
Yeah, so it should be better value. Really.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Yes. Okay. And then one final question. I think in 2015, I can't remember the figure. Was it something like 12% of the entire council budget was on street lights? Electric.
Possibly 12%.
Was it? There was something like that. Do we know if it's gone up or down, or where does it sit?
What, as in cost
Well,
of
I mean,
energy?
just in general percent.
I mean, in a rough number, we're spending about £1.5 million. If we hadn't done what we've done, we'd be spending £3 million. That's a very good position. So that's saving up £1.5 million every year on today's price at 23 pence a kilowatt hour, just over 30 or 34 pence, wasn't it, 2 years ago? Energy's not going to go down.
Yeah.
So finally, Chair, then on that, then the 5 million investment, which it would be an investment to spend, but over a reasonably medium term, that would actually pay back. So I think that's important to understand, isn't it? It's almost like invest to save on those kind of things. Even though it's a significant amount of money, it is worthwhile because you can actually see the payback over, a fairly short period of time in the scheme of things.
Yeah. And another thing as well, if you think about the cost of energy and spending on energy at the moment as a collective for street lighting, energy, so basically our energy consumption is going down, but our assets, as the city grows, we accrue more assets. So we're actually, it's a little bit of magic we're doing actually, because what should really be happening is our consumption should be increasing. Through smart technology and smart controls, we're continuing to reduce and absorb that extra quantity of columns that we're accruing into the contract because of growth.
One final question, sorry. So on that as well, are we finding that the LED technology lasts longer, is less maintenance required? So that also delivers a potential saving as well, does it?
Yes.
So the traditional, life expectancy or not just cost, but general maintenance.
That's right. So with traditional lamps, like we'll do at home, you'd have to change them every so often. The lamps would burn out. Same with street lighting. So you'd have to go out every 4 years and change a lamp. For LEDs, it's fit and forget. The only time we need to go to an LED is to electrically test it, which is every 6 years.
It's a very simple scenario. Discussions between street pedestrian crossings and traffic signals. Where costs to stay the same. That's explained. What effectively our costs efficiency. We're savings because the growth in the asset is gone. Savings. It's exactly the same. If you translate the dialogue we had over that before, it's fits similar.
Well, that's another conversation, Chair. I could not believe how much pedestrian crossings cost us.
25 grand a year, isn't it? Is it £25,000 a year?
Roughly speaking, I mean, it varies on what equipment you've actually got, what scale they are, etc. But it's in that kind of. I mean, the total bill is about 370k. Traffic signals. Most of them are now on low voltage electricity. Nearly everything is LED. But that's 370. It's probably 370. So what's happened to energy prices in that period? So capital investment very soon. So capital investment has been doubled. I guess is the figure.
And Nigel's delighted that I'm increasing that cost with the new crossings that are being delivered in Mickleover, Chair.
Well, also new one in Chellaston as well, actually.
As we finish off the LED programme, we're getting headroom on the budget to pay for the. That's sort of how it's working.
Sorry.
Councillor Cook.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, there are a number of councils that are trying to hybrid solar lighting. I don't think, but they say that they do have power backup, so they do a bit of both. They try and do part ways. With the 25% that we've still got, it's the
cost and the payback, because essentially we're still connected to the grid. the mains connection. So it will rely heavily on the battery operation. That's primarily what you want it to be, rely on solar. Just haven't got the solar. It's called irradiance. We just don't have the sunlight. And what will happen is it will just take off the battery anyway. So you can put all this infrastructure in the home to work off solar, taking the mains. So in the south of England, it works. So places like Southampton and Hampshire, South East, they do get some payback off it. But for us, it's an expensive cost where we're looking to return.
It's interesting because the first one that came up are actually not more north than us. I don't really know how to do
What
it.
they've done it in, well, they've either had capital trials, so projects to see how it goes, and they've done it in footpaths where they don't have to use standards. So for us in Derby, when we like the highway, we look to the British standards. Like a residential setting, we need X amount of light. So what you get with solar is some light, but it won't be a British standard. So I think it can work for some people, but it's just you just don't get that quality.
That's a good sense. So that's that. So you've got to have
Yeah, when we talk about only a quarter of all traffic and pedestrian activity happens between 8 p.m. at night and 7 o'clock in the morning. When we look at road traffic collisions, 40% of fatalities and happen during that period. So we need to make sure, going back to that slide, right light, right place, right time, we've got to make sure we at least adopt the British standards and deliver British standards to that environment.
very delicate balance.
It is.
Been around groups of dimming, switching off times a year, so trying to get that sort of balance of what happens between roads, security, and lighting stuff with the energy. It's not easy to meet.
And do any of you know Spon Canal? I looked at a solar kind of project for that solution for it, and it's a straight canal path, really, really easy to light, calculations wise. When we put it into a solar context, to get the British standards anywhere near it, we would have had to have had 6 metre columns. We would have had to have had them 15 metres apart, so you literally could touch columns. That's how much you need infrastructure to get any type of quality lighting to the solar installation. It is improving, but just not probably enough.
It's a bit like solar lights in your garden, isn't it? The packaging looks really good, doesn't it? When you get them home, they're not really that great, are they?
But in December, if you look at them, they're not working.
Decorative rather than functional.
Yes, exactly. I get entirely where you're coming from. It's just not there yet, is it? No, I'm sure one day it will be, but right, thank you very much indeed. Right, so let's move on to the last aspect, climate finance. Will you run through the slides, please?
Looking at how funds and resources are being allocated for climate action, currently there are very limited direct funds that the council holds specifically for climate change action. Usually work is carried by different teams across the council, and that contributes either directly or indirectly to action on climate change. So, for example, through active sustainable transport, materials by highways, through development and management of green blue spaces by Regen or part the work that property and FM are doing around license. So there isn't really anything that's directly held specifically for climate change. The climate change team itself, that comprises one full-time officer. There is a further temporary resource in this one, two full-time. The climate change team's budget covers that salary of that one full-time officer, and the remaining temporary resources externally. The council's climate change fund, which is cash for funding, being held back until 2026-27. There is also some national government private funding coming into the city to create a heat network. We were also asked a question around co-benefits and how they were being monitored against the allocation of resource. Co-benefits are actually really complex and they're not always easy to quantify, and we would need additional resource to be able to do that. It's worth saying that co-benefits offer added value for money. You know, it might be working in one area, say insulating somebody's house. If you're improving the energy efficiency of someone's home, like getting insulation, for example, it will reduce their bills, they'll have more comfortable home, better housing quality, and better physical and mental health. So the knock-on effect of that, and experienced by health and care departments, including NHS, is less pressure on services and lower spend, and that also applies to the council's sort of health and social care services. And linked to that, other areas such as public health, the Director of Public Health annual report around climate change and its effect on health, you know, they highlighted in that climate change has been described as the greatest threat to health of this century. And they've made a series of recommendations on how to deal with that. And impact change, they're created by factors like pollution, new infections and diseases, flooding, extreme heat, storms, leading the reduced availability and increased costs of energy. So that it's really any questions?
Councillor Holmes.
Yeah. We go back to the previous slide, please. So just can you just explain the council's climate change fund capital funding is being held back until 26-27? The logic behind that.
It was a decision. So your fund basically help an opportunity to discuss it. But there's also some sense change action. With the point here, the plan has been changed. So it's basically it's been held.
Just following up, I'm not going to make political points or whatever, you know. So it's been various things said in the chamber on these debates, and you know, maybe that's more appropriate because you know, obviously officers are here rather than responsible, etc. I get that. It seems to be a sense that you know we have a plan, we have aspirations, we have, but there's something holding it back. It's always resources, the FDEs. You've got not enough. We can't fund. You know, reports and bids for external funding. There seems to be that. I suppose what I'm going to try and say, Chair, is how is the political administration going to actually take this forward? Talk about how important it is for health and all those other things. Really, getting it's very negative from officers, but not in a way that they want. It's they feel. I sense they're very frustrated about you know being able to deliver these things. You know, I don't know if there's some kind of recommendation made to sort of ask the cabinet to take the climate change plan and either bring to scrutiny or even to full council their specific proposals of how they're going to actually make a difference in the city.
Fully recommendations from the through. TFP and council and it has actually driven quite a lot of business as usual change, which has resulted in a lot of efficiencies. However, on the flip side, at the other edge of that particular sword, it's the reduction in credit funding. To research for cost of borrowing is a pressure on accounts. So that's affecting it. So just to contextualise that for me, the MTFP has been in some loose way one of the processes of MTFP, probably since about 2016, have been the best ways of driving efficiencies which have had a climate change benefit. It is one of the things that is creating off against change.
Okay, I personally would think that we need to just put a recommendation into cabinet to say, actually you'd be better off putting this back in. Would you agree?
I think, Chair,
Let Jack come in. He's talking about.
I just wanted to mention that there is a recommendation that the board can make, but it could also be that the board uses its powers to ask that a cabinet member attends the next meeting. Probably is good to start thinking about how you can take time to formulate recommendations and perhaps using this time between now and the next meeting to ask the council cabinet member comes along and maybe speaks to the parts of this item that the board haven't been able to talk about today because it's just officers in attendance. So there may be some use in scrutiny doing it that way and then coming back to a recommendation at a later date.
I think something along the lines of how the administration proposes to deliver on climate change via its climate change action plan, and we invite the cabinet member to address the board. Something along those lines, give or take. Yeah, that's a very positive thing. I don't want it to be a real negative kind of come along. It would just be an opportunity to hear what from the political leadership, what their views are to support officers in what we've seen today, Chair.
Okay.
I suppose that's
is there a seconder for that? Just to ask whether it's agreed.
Yep, we're all happy.
Say the budget process will be further down the road as well. So, yeah, we'll probably be able to comment a bit more on next year's.
I mean, this point said it being Chair. It's been mentioned in this issue has been debated the last couple of times in full council. Cabinet member has and the leader has mentioned big projects, big announcements or outcomes. So, but actually, I'm not quite sure if I've heard those. So, it'd really be interesting to have the cabinet member here to explain.
That's fine. We can do that. Okay. That it on this item? That's it. Thank you very much indeed. I've quite enjoyed that. Hold on. No, mobility infrastructure now, mate. It's okay. Yeah, of course. Sure. Good. So, next item is mobility and infrastructure. This is the item on. For those of you who are not here at the last meeting, this item was requested after we had an interesting discussion about the principle that transport infrastructure should primarily be focused on moving people rather than just vehicles. I thought it was a really interesting point and asked that we hear more about what this means in practice for infrastructure planning and development. Okay, so can we have the next slides, please?
Of course.
So this is double act between. Super. The concept that you've introduced, Chair, around focus for the future, if you like, the global those transport vehicles. It obviously does embrace all, but it's a lot more as a global concept, it's much more realistic in terms of spaces for people, integration of different factors, including, of course, spaces, housing spaces, all brand stuff. So one of the things that we thought after the last meeting was to translate it easy. Well, this is that get down to how mobility as a concept works, and you see here that that shows what we want out of the size of the mind. So not too different to shape, it's compact. Many people know, of course, that we've got housing boundaries that begin to stretch our structure well. And it's not easy to connect the traditional art of dome to some urban growth. So straight away you bring into a concept where potential is the market provision housing actually out of date with concepts for transport mobility. This ties in previous topic of climate change as well. So people having private vehicle is a choice. So on here you can see those extensions. See the city. Well, just identification of the city, some of the edges people need to expand. Move on, Jim. So this is quite interesting. To some extent, it sounds big data. This is the best I've got. These things. Look at the blue and grey cards. So what it shows, commuter trips, 50% by car. Now that is bang on the government's target for 2027. So we set that target 20. We're pretty much there. However, our short trips generated within the city and ending in the city is not good. That we import a heck of a lot of commuter trip today. Yeah, 70% of our commuter trips come from us. 50 as a headline. But then those short trips generated within the city are way outside of the national bridge. So these many times. So there's a real factor in here about what do we do with those trips? When we're talking short trips, the graph they measure from 0 to 2.5. Particularly 0 to 2.5. So that then gives us a bit of a target to look at. Because for too long in the shift, it's been there's people use it, etc., etc. It's really hard to change those habitual patterns. And in some cases, it's impossible because the combined trips, people dropping kids off going to shop, people work on a job, for example. People work jobs where they need a big services delivered in people's homes, whether it's shopping, care centres. So there's some trips that you just never go share. That's what they are. And then we've also got through trips that come through Derby, so they count on our network, but they're going from somewhere else to somewhere else. So looking at those, they are, if you like, Derby trips. They're born in Derby. They're really small. So that's where we start looking at ability, bringing it down to community level. And do you want to just move on to the next slide, Jim? This is a complicated slide. Just sort of addressing our emissions, where fuel comes from, where domestic, what transport is. You can see transport, a lot of emissions, and in some ways you think that transport might, so you'd expect that to be the areas. What's the areas? Go through traffic. Actually, often 98%, 97%. It's not to say that 97% of traffic's there, but it's just a function of traffic. And all those small trips. Do you want to do one again? Before we just dive into okay. So I'm trying to show on here is some of the things that we're doing, particularly during TCF and FTZ. Some of this is infrastructure, big changes, some of it's quite small. And some of it is about active travel. Some of it you see like things like parkings and stuff. Putting those little seating areas with tree planting, creating spaces for people. And just trying to gently encourage, not necessarily people to travel differently, to use the spaces differently. So we're trying to be sort of less controversial. Trying to create places where and then of course, you know, we are things like seen from here is the change was basically to introduce this concept of local plans, doing away with some things about local transport plan priorities. We're trying to embrace what's coming through in terms of maybe what the community investment. Something we had a reasonable idea. Trying to build board level plans. Around sort of having longer term and higher level investment plans. So we've talked about 3 year plans. It doesn't matter if they're 4 or 5 year plans. 3 year plan, but we can actually look at things differently and away from some of the traditional transport things. So some of the draft plans that I've seen, the local park is quite integral. Partly because people want to be able to connect to it. But actually, there's quite a lot of travel, whether it's by 4 or 5, that takes place through those. You might have a school on one side, a shopping area on the other, housing, and crisscross. And how can we improve the way that park is park facility, but it's also part of the local travel? And again, it comes back to trying to puncture a hole in this 2.5 kilometre travel up to 5. That's kind of where we're trying to take some of this. And it, hopefully you got the idea of that example around the neighbourhood plans, the ward plans, about how we're not looking at transport in the way that we have to try and take a wider view of it, more about place making. The park is where community-based transport is taking the next step. We're able to break with the tradition of saying, is it highway, is it not highway? It's where people move.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Owen Swift, I'm the head of climate and active environment. So I'm just going to run through, just to build on what Nigel's just been talking about there, just about some participation data, what that actually means for people. And so I've got a number of slides I'll quickly back through, which is all around our existing data around cycling habits and walking and cycling habits for commuting, essentially. So active, what we would call active travel. And that's really, really fundamental when we start to think about short journeys and trips. Also, what are some of the probably behaviours that mean that maybe some people don't walk or cycle maybe as much as they potentially could. So I mean, if you looked at that diagram there, that's showing participation rates for cycling and walking, travelling. And on the left-hand side, this sort of small blue line, and then the larger red. That's the percentage of the adult population that's participated in cycling or walking in the last 12 months for travel purposes. So circa 50% have for walking and then 11% for cycling. So if you think about those that haven't done that, actually we've got best part of 50% that haven't walked for travel purposes the last year, which is a pretty high number. If we just move on, please, Jack. See that in there, the readers. And then this is what we've got here then is those that have been walking or cycling for leisure in the last year. Well, so it starts looking at walking for travel purposes about 50%, and if we think about those that have been walking for leisure, it's just slightly more. So we know actually that some people are walking for leisure purposes more than they are for actual mobility and travel wise. That might be going out for a walk somewhere, Sunday morning walks, those types of things. Let's move on, please, Jack.
That was the next one. Sorry, I was
there we are. Okay, and this is a really interesting one. So actually, whilst there's a large proportion maybe people that don't actually walk for travel purposes or leisure, within that there's also quite some stubborn or stark statistics as well, where actually if we think about those people that haven't done any walking at all in the last year, or some that may have, or how regular people are doing that, nearly 45% or nearly 50% should I say, the people who have been or haven't done no walking sessions in the last month. So think about over a year, we're saying 50% of people have either not. If we think about that in a month's context, then actually nearly 50% haven't done anything in the last month, which means that they may have done it once throughout the year, twice, but not more than that. So it's a relatively large number. But you start to equate that to thinking about the short distances and trips that are happening in the city by vehicles and cars. Well, we're probably not walking, which we probably could do, or cycle or wheel, and actually we're using motorised vehicles. Thanks, Jack. And so really one of the big drivers within that is we're not as active as what we could be or should be. And so we, in the city, Derby, we are current for adults 16 plus, we probably have got about 35% of our population are inactive. So that means they achieve less than 30 minutes of physical activity a week. And by physical activity, I don't mean going to the gym. That includes walking, and that's walking bouts of 10 minutes. So that's how that 30 potentially be made up. But within that, we have 64% of those people who are inactive don't do anything at all. So it's a real challenge. So actually, when we can't start to convert percentages into the actual population, it's quite large. And so actually to support people to actually walk and maybe cycle, starting that for both travel purposes and leisure purposes, we need to support people to be active in the first place. And walking is an easy entry method into it. There's some significant barriers to people being active, and specifically walking. And so some of the things that Nigel was actually talking about there in terms of what some of the street scene does that look like, the physical environment, people to be able to walk outside. Really important. It's just as important now the social environment that's created as well. So things like parks, the street scene, actually what that looks like, the social environment starts to become a really important place where people can socialise just as much as the physical. Moving on, please, Jack. And so this then starts to merge, actually talking about mobility and traffic and transportation highways. This is actually starting to move us more into that physical activity agenda. And so some of you will be aware that for a number of years now, we've had a physical activity and sports strategy Move More Derby, and there's an emerging framework that we're refreshing on that from Move More Derby, which is around building that activity into daily life. So it's not about those session structured activities, playing sports, etc. Actually, it starts at the doorstep, and that's probably about that mobility concept. Where do people want to go? Where do they need to go? It actually starts as soon as you leave the door. And to enable that to happen, to be able to enable people to feel like it's something that they can do, the environment is really, really important in terms of the physical environment. But actually, what's the purpose of what's that social environment to enable people to do that? Safety, security, actually the community piece that sits around that is really, really important. And so in terms of refresh framework that we're looking at, that active environment piece is really, really, really critical. Just move on. And so in terms of where we are currently, in terms of the Move More Derby refresh and work, there's lots of work that has been happening which still continues, and some emerging work as well. So we lots of text on that slide, and there's also a few images. But there's lots of work that we know is happening around the schools work that happens and has been for a number of years through Cycle Derby, and we work around that, bikeability, and actually a mission statement really in terms of not making sure that every child leaves parents can ride a bike, which is a bold and ambitious aim. Actually, it's something that we are trying to do. The skills and the ability and the routine and having been able to do that is really, really important. Similarly, cycling is one aspect. But I think one thing that we possibly haven't focused on, which we could do in the city, is really that entry level, which is around walking, cycling. It does require some content. It requires the infrastructure to enable that to happen. But the walking aspect is just as important. So that's where we're trying to start, trying to focus on that energy and attention place. Just moving on, please, Joe. And so an emerging theme around the active environments is exactly that. So we start to think about active environments and actually the role that can play for people. There's lots of considerations that need to go into that. So actually thinking about that at a local neighbourhood level, thinking about the blue, the green infrastructure, and building on the really solid, strong work that's been happening around school safe havens. Actually, they've been a really, really important role of actually starting to introduce that concept of walking. For many, that will mean leaving the door and walking to school as a unit. Some that might mean they drive in school, but actually they're still having to get out of the car and then walk to school for that last little bit of journey. So that's all about that introduction. Actually, that's been seen some great successes, just trying to create that habits. And some of that is really important. So there's a policy context to that as well. It's not just around teaching a young person how to ride a bike. It's thinking about what's the policy context that meaning that we can't drive straight up to. How are we supporting or enabling? In some places, creating an environment for people to walk and cycle, part of that. And I'm sure many of you have seen successes that have been happening with school safe havens and the impact that has been having, both that impact being recognised locally, but also nationally. And I think the school safe havens work that is happening in Derby is being held up as an exemplar by Active Travel England and others around the success of how that is working. And actually, a number of local authorities are actually approaching Derby to understand how this works and frame and think about how can they take that and use that, something adopt that back in there. And the multiple benefits of that are, yes, we're supporting and creating behaviours around people moving more, being physically active. We talked about climate change before. Climate change, all those complex conditions, things that happen to air quality, so actually air quality outside school, getting people actually walking, cycling, wheeling, so actually being physically active and moving. The social environment, if you are on one of these streets, you are seeing school with parents, guardians, carers walking together, conversing. That's created that social environment, which is all having a positive impact in terms of creating that behaviour around supporting side. And so this is the work we're trying to do around physical activity and movement, and actually that being very much located in place and having a place-based approach to doing that. So thinking about we have a school safe haven, but actually we're seeing some really positive impacts there in terms of supporting and creating some behaviours. We're just restricting that to one area of that community. how are people navigating the rest of that community? And that's only supporting maybe some aspects of the community. Many people who live within a certain area have no relationship with the school. No, actually, they don't have children that go to that school. They don't need to. So actually, where are those people going? What are the short journeys that they're making? Actually, how do we think about concepts and building on that framework, understanding at a community level, how people want to navigate their neighbourhoods? What are some of the barriers, challenges and issues to that? And actually, how do we start to work alongside them to overcome them and understand them? And that starts to lead into what the priorities are of that place, actually thinking about how we support and development of green spaces. That could be around looking at our parks and green space, looking at our play area, and actually what the play area is like in that park. Do they become a destination where people want to go, and that becomes part of it. So that's where that starts to link up that concept of mobility, and especially rooted in place and at a local level. And so finally, how does that then start to emerge within at a ward level? And actually, how does that start to look and work in terms of that being a more holistic council approach, as opposed to just necessarily being a function or a section of the council, with that highways, transportation, physical activity and health. So actually, that's where the work around understanding neighbourhood priorities, thinking what they are, where they've been developed with ward councils, they've been developed with that community. And actually then they start to become the theme areas where supporting services can then start to be developing some of those priority actions within those individual areas. So actually thinking about the importance of district centres and the connections to those, improving connections to local amenities in green spaces, the ward and neighbourhood plans that I have seen, and actually the themes that come out of them. So I'm talking about things to do with priorities around traffic and transportation, parks and green spaces, supporting our communities, be that people like friends groups or other organisations, to play a role in supporting its own community to move. These things don't necessarily sit in isolation, they are all interdependent. So actually trying to do that then towards them, so we can be, as an organisation, we can be more efficient and effective. Also, the work and the actions that we're doing is being informed and led by the local democratic process of ward councils, as well as community priorities as well. Actually, in terms of an understanding insight intelligence that's driving the work, that's allowing us to do that at a local level to hopefully support sustainability.
What I hope from that slide probably gives you a bit of a picture. We reorientated some services together. So we understand climate justice, sustainability. So sustainability. That's really how we're bringing them together. We haven't just services stuff. We actually, we know, and believe me, I've been in local, seen that.
Yeah, I'm sure we have. I have too.
But with this, that slide is really hopefully giving you a bit of a clue as to actually how we're trying to integrate services, so that the stuff that Owen's looking at with the metric and active communities, how we build that into the community trials. And that's the simplest example. Easiest way we can articulate this concept of ability to something.
Thank you very much indeed. I've got a couple of questions I'll ask, and then I'll pass over. Then I've got some more as well. So the short journeys, 0 to 2.5 kilometres, do you think some of that's driven by, interesting word, use the word driven, because we have two major employers in the city, so we've got Rolls-Royce and Bombardier right here in the city, which is unusual. Do you think that's part of that problem, because people will drive to work because there's lots of parking spaces at that location? Do you think that has a disproportionate impact if we use our comparators?
It does, and actually geography of Derby and its community really in the sense that if you take somewhere like Nottingham, a lot of its commuting is targeted at the city centre. That's the traditional model you think about. Actually, a lot of that. So it does change our patterns of movement. So you can kind of see the 5K. kind of allow some of that in there. We know the patterns of ship work, things like 0 to 2.5.
Yeah, but
worth getting your car out.
But you say that, Chief, but I mean, living near a school like I do, you'll be surprised that you look at cars and you think,
surprised.
I know where you live,
Yeah.
and even I would walk, and I've only got one leg. So that's right.
No, I absolutely see what you're saying, and that's what we've tried to do with school safety. Years and years and years. Traffic firewalls. So go school safe agents. You're co-producing community. So we proposed it. We work through quite a long process. This is one of the issues. Similar things in school streets. Try and fail. It's because they don't produce them. That co-production takes a long time. So you can take 2 years, 2 or more to get a school safe in place. But when it's in, it is intended to be a challenge to traditional school travel. Don't make no bones about it. It is intended to actually disrupt that kind of behaviour.
Well, I've got questions on that because I've recently been through that process in Shelton, so I'll come back to that one. Has anybody else got any questions? Councillor Holmes and then Councillor Wills.
Thank you. Couple of points just on the school parking issue, which I'm sure we all experience on a daily basis. Well, not necessarily directly experience unless you live near a school, but our residents experience. Yeah, absolutely. And some of the issues are horrendous, and you feel for residents because you can't really offer anything other than, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to speak to public protection officers, going to speak to transport officers, we're going to ensure that transport officers are aware of it in regards to the strategic plans that are emerging. And I get the strategic plans. I get the fact that we need aspirations, we need visions, we need bold plans in the longer term. But officers know, especially Nigel, know that I still believe that to deliver some of the more acute, shorter term improvements that we all have a big list of in our wards, and they could be small interventions for pedestrian safety, or maybe some considered parking restrictions to improve pedestrian safety or road safety in general. Just lots of small things, and the ability has been effectively taken away from this chair to actually propose that like we used to 2 or 3 years ago. So that is a frustration because I worry that it's going to take a long time to actually see some of those things filter through. And I know the combined authority has a part to play with funding and everything else, but I genuinely worry about our ability to actually deliver some of those smaller schemes, small interventions in a reasonable time frame. And I won't stop moaning about it, but there you go. But just going back to the school. I know in my ward, and this is probably the same everywhere, the majority of schools, if not all of them, say Mickle ward now have more than half pupils from out of catchment. Let's call it catchment, even though there isn't such a thing. Which obviously inherently means that you've got cars crisscrossing around the city, and choice is great. I'm not saying that it should not be a choice of education for parents. But the impact of that is what we're seeing on a daily basis across the city and Mile, where we have acute issues in cul-de-sacs and roads because of school parking, because there isn't really, in most cases, a viable case for them to walk because it's so far away. And safe havens have a place, and there's one in Mickleover, and I was sceptical, and it's worked reasonably well. So actually, some of the concerns I have, I have to admit they didn't necessarily come to fruition, thankfully, but they aren't the silver bullet.
Yeah.
But those kind of interventions, or that style of interventions, I would definitely support, because I think you're never going to be able to completely reduce the use of cars unless there's school transport in areas to a level where it's not noticeable. But I think there is definitely a way that we can focus on where there are acute issues in some of the cul-de-sacs, pavement parking, just really inconsiderate parking to get as close to the school as possible. You know, I think that is a major thing that the whole city could look at to actually, in the spirit of a safe haven, and take that further, really. And so I definitely support that. But the point is that, yeah, plans, absolutely great, long-term plans. Let's really work on that because, you know, we want to be ambitious, but let's not lose sight of some of the small interventions that we can do in the shorter term. And really, Chair, I would like officers to once again think about how that could be possibly achieved, because otherwise we might find small councillors that sometime never, 3 to 5 years, maybe longer. I mean, that's not really acceptable for some pedestrian safety measures to help walking into the district centre that could be done now and actually would make a real difference.
Obviously, it allows for minor interventions that require something like shelter stuff and for room safety things. If they are genuine with safety, we can all find people who tell us that there's a road safety issue outside their house. Actually, they consider it not really a road safety issue. But you know, where there's things that are akin to maintenance, there is something like you were saying, genuine pedestrian safety feature that can be easily do those. So you can still propose those things, and we'll work through the list on. Now, what the policy does do is set out probably an annual budget. What we can't keep doing is just to keep taking that. So you've got the genuine safety issues of the so tell us what assess. Minor interventions, tell us, we'll have a look at them, see which ones you want to sort of focus on. Which would be sort of longer term things which might pop some issues as well.
You should just, I'm sorry, I'm too.
You might take a lot of time. I will allow this one.
One point. Get that, and I welcome it. However, I'm not seeing that, the minor interventions where there's genuine need. I'm not getting that feedback from officers. It's all about pushing, sorry, not pushing it to the long grass, it's unfair. But it's about, oh, well, we'll consider that as part of the holistic delivery. So I welcome what you're saying, but I want to see that filter down to the neighbourhood boards and the councillors.
And I think that's a really good challenge this year because we're having to reorientate the service in line with the end goal. But we probably, most of our delivery activity this year is hangover from last year. I think it is a fair challenge. We're spending lots of time on what we need. It's a significant, when we came to Canada, it's a significant change. It's a significant change for the service. We've not done this. So it's a fair point. If we were sat here this time next year and you were saying the same thing, I'm very disappointed. I'm not saying it won't happen. I'm regularly disappointed, but I would hope, you know, we are spending a lot of resources.
Councillor Rawson.
Chair, going back to these very short journeys to 2 kilometres, I think you said, where's Argus Arena. So you mentioned the location of large employers being one possible factor. What is it you think that's sort of making Derby? Is it public transport? Have we got services? Well, is there anything that you've identified for particularly making Derby?
There's a couple of things that collide with each other. It's going to sound horrible. Our public transport is frustrating in terms of journey lack of and sometimes that's not a point when having choices. It's just a reality of road space in some circumstances. It does frustrate our transport. journey reliability is a factor. On the other, this is where the paradox is. Our congestion is actually not bad. Right round Derby. Honestly, if you and I'll give you an example.
Yeah, USS Enterprise.
No, it's the same roads as you do. But if context, just think, you drive into Nottingham, if you that's it's like Derby to state. Because they have peak spreading. It's a well-known factor. And lots of other cities have peak spreading where their peaks are not times. Go to Utoxeter Road, 8:30 to 9:15. Terrible. 9:30, you can walk down the road with a cup of tea. You can't do that approaching Nottingham. You can't do it approaching lots of other major cities. So our congestion is actually not quite bad enough to force people to change. I lived in York for a while. I didn't bother owning a car because it was a nightmare. And it wasn't just commuting; it was tourist traffic. It was a nightmare. You just didn't bother. You just walked everywhere or caught a bus.
Just coming in on that point, and do you also think that this is my knowledge of using buses because I don't tend to use them very often? All the buses from Chelmsford go straight into town. So if I worked at Rolls-Royce,
yes,
I would have to get a bus from there into town, and then another bus from. You're not going to do that.
Yeah.
Nobody in their right mind would do that.
Yeah.
Do you think a lot of the problem is that maybe the bus network isn't quite right? But I'm sure it is because the Arriva do know what they're doing. Let's not lie about that. Do you think there's something there?
It's commercially based,
right?
So all buses are off.
Yes, I can't. You got a question? Please.
So the Hardwick School say it's been quite popular. It's been well received, let's say. In that block surrounding that area, London, Arboretum, and coming into the centre. I think one issue that perhaps we haven't talked about is the sheer volume of cars on the street generally. So not cars that are driving, but cars that are parked. But in streets like terraced houses, they're very, very packed. What we're seeing is getting a lot of residents complaining about being able to park in those. When people are parking, they're taking up significant chunks of the path because there just isn't enough space. So it's hard for chains as much as to do that. My concern is having lived in the area pretty much all my life, seeing this kind of evolve, get worse and worse. One car per household, and not really going homes, and you've easily got 3 to 4. There is nowhere to park. What kind of outbox and sort of new ways that we use to solve that? Because I can only see it getting worse in 2 to 5 years.
It's a really big policy question. So change the environment to satisfy. The big issue is just space that there's stakeholder. So do we convert land and space into parking? Or is it about sort of saying that's the space you've got, and it's going to change the way that we operate vehicles? So this is one of the things that very, very small scale we try to do huge transport. Right, is to try and put a parking scheme in there aimed at incentives, then try and get the operator a little bit ourselves, mainly trying to get the operator as to what the commercial benefit is to not having a second car. So a second car, great convenience, but it costs quite a lot of money to keep a second car. That, if you've got a car club, yeah, you see the true cost of it because you can standing cost. It's pay as you go type system. And we were experimenting to see whether people did your second car, because I guess car can provide that level of convenience. Maybe one or two at this stage, but actually the economics are quite fascinating. If you use the car club car a lot, you'd think, oh, it's cheaper than a car. So there's a threshold. Some of those second cars are maybe doing as little as 3,000 miles a year. Incentives are just not very, not over cost. Yeah. So there's things like that we can try. I don't know how many people have a vehicle for social reasons rather than actually making trips, if you see what I mean. I think certainly there's some evidence nationally that people 19 to 25 having a car is a status symbol, and it rather than a convenience or something you make trips, you have one because it's your status. So there's subtleties in this as well. But it does come back to that policy question. Do we say, okay, everybody wants a car, we're going to change our space to accommodate it? Never going to do it. Or do we sort of say, that's what it is. Green spaces should be green spaces, which spaces. Then we've got to get people to think different about the car. Is ownership challenged?
I did read something on the BBC news website some years ago now, and it was saying that you probably own the last car you ever will, because before long there's going to be driverless cars come along, and you will just call one up from an app. It will come and pick you up, take you wherever you want to go, and drop you off, and it will go, and that will be it. That's in theory is what's going to happen. Whether it does or not, I don't know, but I think it's interesting. Any more okay? Any more questions? No. I just want to touch on safe havens first. I've been through the process of trying to get a safe haven in Shamlock, you know about this time. And we went through the whole process for a good 18 months, visited other schools, small ones, and went to put it in. And I genuinely thought it was going to work until we monitored a school pickup using the safe haven. And because of the road layout of Western Park Avenue, it just made the traffic was unbelievable. The speed the parents were driving down. We almost had a couple of accidents. And while we were sat there monitoring in high visors, so we were there, people could see us, and we nearly had a couple of RTAs. And that moment we all said, that's it, this cannot go ahead. I think it's a dreadful shame. But a lot of it is down to this attitude of I need to park as close as I possibly can, regardless of how dangerous it is. I think a lot of it's how the road network works. I mean, we've got a long straight road there, which doesn't help, but that's one of them. I mean, so safe havens, what I'm trying to say is safe havens aren't the be all and end all. Sometimes they work, and other times they're not going to. It just depends on the road network.
That's right, and it depends on the community as well, the community around the school, this sort of stuff. I think the point that is made, we can land safe haven in there benefits. Can we use that as more activity to look at things and connect? It's not going to work everywhere.
No.
You know, we've got schools on the foot road. You can't safe haven the foot road.
No, you can't. It's just not going to happen, is it? Absolutely not. So right, okay, so thank you very much indeed. Is there nothing else? Are you all good? Right, thank you very much indeed. You can may now leave if you wish. We can stay to the end if you want. Oh, you're going to go.
Long day already.
Yes, I know what you mean. I had a few more questions here, so I've been good to let you off. Right, so where are we now? Work programme. fixed twice there. That's what thrown me out of. Can tell. Jack, is there anything for us to highlight?
Just to say, for kind of Frox has got the opportunity to do some kind of informal preparation work before the next two meetings. I'd suggest that that's really moving towards really good scrutiny practice, particularly building up to huge topics like MCA, which is particularly MCA, knowing how to scrutinise MCA effectively in this form.
Yeah, I think we should do that next year. I think next year that would be better to do that. Yeah, sort of starting in sort of late May, shall we say.
So I guess yeah, the proposal is to have one about MCA before the next meeting, which is going to be an informed meeting, and that's been scheduled, so it's just after the transport plan is published. And then we've got the final meeting, which is about city centre regeneration, and Tammy and Catherine have talked about some of the resources that they can use through national level bodies about city centre regeneration to share with you and give you the opportunity to kind of test out recommendations beforehand and be able to do a bit of work with them about making those better. So the point of the report is to ask your approval to do that. And then if you've got any other thoughts about the work programme which you'd like to add, or that's what
I'm quite happy with that. Everybody else? Yeah, okay. Right. Thank you. That brings us to the meeting to a close. The next meeting will be on the 13th of January. So I'll take this opportunity to wish you all a Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.